Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen. Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathiran kathira. Amma ba'du, my brothers and sisters, another big lesson we learn from these ayat and the incidents of the Battle of Uhud is the fact that the time and place of death for everybody is decided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Munafiqeen tried to spread the word that if the Muslims had not gone to Uhud, they would not have died. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that a person, he's saying, and in this ayat which I will put before you, he said that a person's time and place of death is fixed, and he will go to it at the appointed time, irrespective of whatever else he may believe. Now, if we just reflect in our lives, I know myself, I know many incidents, not one, where this ayat is true, that a person at that time and place went to, for his death, went there. Let me give you just one example. I was a planter, I was a tea planter for 10 years, and one of the estates in which I was working, I was the manager, was Parle Estate in Ayarpad, in Anavalis, in Coimbatore district in Tamil Nadu, in India. Now, one of the things we do in tea is that in tea, among the tea bushes, we plant a tree called Grevillea robusta, which is also called silver oak. Now, this tree is planted at a specific distance to give about 15% of shade to the tea bush. The tea bush needs sunlight, but it also needs shade. If there is no shade at all, then the tea leaves will get burnt, and that is not good for the quality of the tea. So therefore, these trees are planted. Now, to regulate this shade, we do every year what we call shade regulation, where some of those branches of the Grevillea tree are chopped off, lopped off. So for that, the Grevillea tree is a straight tree, just goes straight up like that. And then the branches on top. So we have people, men, who climb up the tree, and then they go to the place where the branches are. They sit on the branch like that, and then they lop some of the other branches to ensure that the requisite amount of shade is obtained on the tea bushes. So we had this gang of shade lopping people one day, and they went and they were working. And one of those workers, so imagine this is the whole tea field, which is maybe, say 40, 50 hectares, so about over 100 acres, over, 2.47, so that's about over 200 acres. And it's got trees all over. So you've got a man here, you've got a man there, you've got a man there, so they're spread all over the place. So one of them who was sitting up, and he would have been at a height of about maybe 15, 20 feet up from the ground. He's sitting up there, he's in this fork of this tree like this, and he's chopping some branches. He felt unwell. So he came down. So when he came down, the supervisor was there, some of his other friends were there. They asked him how he is. He said, I'm not feeling too well. So they said, shall we take you to the hospital? The hospital was literally from where this man was. The hospital, the Ayarpadi State Hospital, was less than half a kilometer. Right? So you could see the hospital. From where the man was, you could see the hospital, less than half a kilometer. They would have taken him there in maybe 5 minutes, if that. He said, no, I don't want to go to the hospital. I'm okay. So just give me some water. They gave me some water. We usually have tea there, which is without milk. It is black tea sweetened with jaggery, with raw sugar, and very nice to taste. And then no milk in it. So the tea was there. So they gave him some tea. He drank that. He sat with his back to the tree, and He said, I'm fine. The supervisor told him, you want to take the day off, you take the day off, you want to go to the hospital, we take you to the hospital. He said, no, absolutely. I just felt, I'm fine now. And I'm going back up. So he climbed up back on top of the tree. He sat there. He lopped a few branches. Suddenly, his knife, and that's a big machete, just fell from the tree, thump on the ground. They looked up, and he's like this. Died. Now think about this. This man died 20 feet up in the air in the fork of a tree. Why? And interestingly, the man felt unwell. He came down. He could have gone to the hospital. He could have been taken to the hospital. Any number of possibilities could have happened. They didn't happen. He climbed up back to the place which was marked for his death. And he died. So in his qadar was written that this man would die up in the air, 20 feet up in the air, sitting in this tree, and that is where he died. Now, there are many such incidents of people who die in some very strange kind of circumstances. And of course, there are some very beautiful incidents. For example, one of our great teachers and also a very good friend of mine, of course he was my senior, so he was a friend, and I mean that in the most respectful way, Maulana Yusuf Patel, rahmatullah alayhi. I was going to South Africa, and in Dubai airport, in the lounge, who do I see? Maulana Yusuf Patel, him and his wife. So I met him, and we were very happy to meet him. So I asked him, I said, where are you going, Maulana? He said, I'm going for Umrah. So I'm going first to Medina, and then I'm going for Umrah to Makkah. So I said, please make dua for me and so on. Alhamdulillah, I'm sure he did. He went to Medina, then he went for Umrah. He made Umrah. He sat in the Mataf in Masjid al-Haram, looking at the Kaaba. He passed away. He died. And when we met in Dubai, which was a few days before he was to die, he didn't know he was going to die. He didn't plan to go to Makkah to die. I mean, I'm sure he would have loved for that to happen, and Allah gave it to him, alhamdulillah. But this is not what he had planned. But this is what happened. Another great Shaykh, another great alim with world renown, and also again one of our teachers, Maulana Sayyid Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi rahmatullah alayhi, right? He died at the age of 97. He had had a stroke, so he was partially disabled, and he used to be in a wheelchair, and his grandson meaning grandnephew, because he had no children, his grandnephew used to take care of him. And I heard this story from him. I had gone after he passed away. I didn't get to meet him. I returned from America. I was living in America at the time. I returned in the year 2000. I returned to India, and it was my intention to go and meet him in Lucknow, where he lived. And this was the 27th of Ramadan, which was also a Friday. And my intention was that I'd finish Ramadan I was in Delhi, so I finished Ramadan in Delhi, complete Eid, and then go to Lucknow and meet Maulana before I went to Hyderabad, which is where I was living. So I was in Delhi. I actually went to the Markaz and did Taraweeh and so on and so forth there. And the following day was the 27th. So it was the 27th night. The following day was the 27th day, and it was Jummah and Jummatul Wida. It was the last Jummah of Ramadan. And that morning, Had Maulana passed away. So later on, almost a year later, I went to Lucknow to Takia Kalan, which is in Raebareli, on the bank of the Jamna. From where Maulana's house is, you look down and you see the Jamna. Very beautiful place. So I went with my very dear friend and my Ustad also, Had Maulana Rashid Nadwi, Naseem Nadwi, Daan Barakatuh. So both of us went there, and this is the story we heard. Now, in his room, very, very Spartan, absolutely, one very thin, almost threadbare carpet with, at some point it had pattern and color. I mean, all that was long gone. That was on the floor. There was a takhat, there was a a bed with just a wooden plank on it, and then a very, very thin cotton mattress, which was almost like nothing. You lie down on the bed, it was like lying on a stone floor. On the bed, and at the back were two bolsters, very, very, very thin, round bolsters. Across from where, if you sat on the bed and so right across the room was a cupboard which was filled with books. On top of the cupboard were some mushafs, and to the right was the door leading into the bathroom. So the reason I'm describing it, so you have a picture in your mind. Now, on that day, on the 27th of Ramadan, the year 2000, which was a Friday, his grandson, grandnephew tells us that he said that then Maulana's practice was that every Friday he would take a bath, and then he would put on his clothes for Jummah. So he would actually put on, including his sherwani and so on, and of course his ghotra on the head. All this he would put on, and then he would sit on that takhat, on that bed, and he would recite Suratul Kahf. Now Maulana was a Hafiz, so he would just recite from memory, and he would recite Suratul Kahf, and his grandnephew said that whoever was in the house, we would come and sit there and we would listen to him reciting Suratul Kahf. He said that day, so he helped him with his bath and so on and so forth. He helped him to dress, and then he helped him onto the cot. He said Maulana sat there, and then he said to me, bring the Musaf. He said, oh, Quran lekha. So this young man, he said that, I thought in my mind was, why is he asking for the Musaf? I mean, he's a Hafiz, and he recites Suratul Kahf from memory. That's his usual practice. Why is he asking for the Musaf? Anyway, he said, I turned to take the Musaf from the top of the cupboard, and I heard him start reciting Suratul Yasin. Not Suratul Kahf. He was reciting Suratul Yasin. And he said, I turned around, I had the Musaf in my hand, I'm looking at him when he came to the ayah, فَبَشِّرْهُ بِمَغْفِرَةٍ وَأَجْرٍ كَرِيمٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and give them the bashara, give them the good news of a great reward with him. And he leaned down, he leaned back against the bolster, and he passed away. So he passed away with the Quran on his tongue. Now the reason I'm saying all this is we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for khatima bil khair, we ask Allah to take us in a state of obedience, to take us in a state of sujood, take us in a state where we are reciting Al-Quran. But the important thing to understand is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides. Many times we fall into the trap of the door of shaitan, which is if only. If this, if that. That if is a door of shaitan. If we had gone to this hospital, if we had taken that treatment, if car accidents, if our car had been, if I had this kind of a car or that kind of a car, if I had a safer car, please understand, I am not against any medical treatments, I am not against any vaccines, I am not against any people wearing masks, I am not against driving safely, I am not against wearing seat belts, I am not against car safety, any safety. But understand that only Allah decides when you are going to die. If car safety could have saved a life, it would have saved the life of Lady Diana Spencer and her boyfriend. They were not only in a Mercedes, which is one of the safest cars ever built, but it was an armored Mercedes. And there were two people in the front, the driver and a bodyguard. And when that accident happened, when they hit the pilings of the bridge, the two in the back died. Right? And one of them in the front died, the other one, nothing happened to him. Everything, there is a lesson in everything. And this is very important for us to understand. Alhamdulillah, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun. We belong to Allah, and to Him is our return. And when our time comes, we go. And saying, if only this, if only that, is the door of shaitan. Never go there. And that is exactly what they were trying to do in the Battle of Uhud, the munafiqeen, the hypocrites. They said to the Muslims, to the believers, 70 people died. It was an absolute a time of great sadness and great mourning in In Medina, those days, even wailing had not been prohibited. So you could hear you would hear the sounds of women wailing and screaming and so on, and very sad. Now, the Munafiqin said, you brought this on yourself. It's because of you. You listened to Muhammad SAW, and that is why all this happened. You should have stayed inside. Why did you go? Why? Because you went to Uhud. This is what happened. If you had stayed in Medina, and if the battle had been fought in Medina, none of you would have died. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that a person's time and place of death is fixed, and he will go to it at the appointed time, irrespective of whatever else he might believe. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, قُلْ إِنَّ الْأَمْرَ كُلُّهُ لِلَّهِ يُخْفُونَ فِي أَنفُسِهِم مَا لَا يُبْدُونَ لَكَ يَقُولُونَ لَوْ كَانَ لَنَا مِنَ الْأَمْرِ شَيْءٌ مَا قُتِلْنَا هَاهُنَا قُلْ لَوْ كُنْتُمْ فِي بُيُوتِكُمْ لَبَرَزَ الَّذِينَ كُتِبَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقَتْلُ إِلَى مَضَاجِعِهِمْ وَلِيَبْتَلِيَ اللَّهُ مَا فِي صُدُورِكُمْ وَلِيُمَحِّصَ مَا فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِذَاتِ الصُّدُورِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, say, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, indeed the affair belongs to Allah. Meaning, indeed Allah is the one who decides. They hide within themselves what they dare not reveal to you, saying, if we had anything to do with this affair, none of us would have been killed here. Say to them, even if you had remained in your homes, those for whom death was decreed would certainly have gone forth to the place of their death, so that Allah might test what is in your breast, in your hearts, and and that which is mahis, that which is in your hearts, the sins, and Allah is all knower of what is in your hearts, what is in your sudur, what is in your breasts, in your chest. Now, brothers and sisters, wallahi, I am eyewitness to this. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has shown me many of His signs, and I am most grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for having shown me these signs, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant that we take heed from this, and that our yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our tawakkul on Allah increases because of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses to show us. The shuhada of Uhud, there were 70 shuhada, as I mentioned to you. Al-Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib was Rasulullah called him the Sayyidul Shuhada, the chief and the leader of the Shuhada. He was killed by Al-Wahshi who also accepted Islam later. Two of the Tabi'in, that is the generation after the Sahaba, went to visit Al-Wahshi, who was very old at the time, and they asked him to tell the story of how he killed Hamza radiallahu anhu. It was a big thing because Hamza radiallahu anhu was one of the most famous warriors of the Quraysh at the time, and here was Wahshi who managed to kill him. So Wahshi said, shall I tell it to you just as I told it to the Messenger of Allah, to Rasulullah when he asked me about it? So they said, yes, please tell us, and tell us the way you told it to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Wahshi said that I was a slave of Jubair bin Mut'im, whose uncle was Tu'ayma bin Udaybi, who was killed in Badr. Now, Wahshi said to them, he said, I was a slave, and you don't know what that means. For you it's a word, but it's only a slave who can understand what slavery means, because that whole thing is related why he did that. So he was a slave of Jubair bin Mut'im, and Jubair's uncle Tu'ayma bin Udaybi, he was killed in Badr. So when the Quraysh went forth to Uhud, Al-Wahshi radiallahu anhu, he says, Jubair told me, if you kill Hamza, Muhammad ﷺ's uncle, in retaliation from my uncle, then I will free you. You will be a free man. Now, for a person to be free, in those days, in the days of Jahiliyyah, you could not be, they had slaves, you could buy and sell a slave, a slave could, in some cases, the slave was allowed to purchase his freedom, but that freedom was extremely expensive. For example, Salman al-Farsi radhiyallahu anhu was a slave, and he was a slave of one of the Jews, one of the Jewish farmers. He had a date orchard. So he was that man's slave. And when he asked him, he said, "Can I purchase my freedom?" The man said, "Yes, if you plant and grow and bring to the level of fruition, that they should be bearing fruit, 300 date palms." So imagine now you're planting a seed, it grows, you have no clue whether that thing will actually bear fruit or not, right? So at the end of that period, if 300 bearing trees are not there, you are still a slave. Now that is the kind of thing they used to do, right? Or it would be this much of gold. And how is the slave who is working for you, where is he going to earn this gold from, right? He can't go anywhere, he can't do anything else. So slavery is haram in Islam. It is not permissible. It is one of the greatest sins to make a free person into a slave, and it's tantamount to murder. So it's murder and slavery. These are the two cardinal sins, if I can use the word. And that is why in Islam, for many things, the kafara, the expiation, is free a slave. So free a slave. Islam not only prohibited slavery, but Islam got rid of slavery in a different way. Not by a direct prohibition to say it is haram now, free all slaves, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made freeing slaves into the best possible good deed you could do, and as an expiation of some of the major sins, and therefore people got freed. And it got to a point where there were still some slaves at the time of Nabi SAW also, but they were all people who were actually prisoners of war, and in those days they had no prisons as such, so they couldn't stick them into a prison or a concentration camp. They were given to people as slaves, and they worked with them, and they managed to get their freedom, or whatever the case might be. So therefore that is what happened. Now in the case of Al-Wahshi, so he said that I was this man's slave, and he said, "Go and kill the uncle of Muhammad SAW, and I will free you, because this will be in retaliation for my uncle who was killed." Now Al-Wahshi radhiyallahu anhu says, I am Abyssinian, and like my countrymen, I am very good at throwing the spear, and I rarely miss with it. And Al-Wahshi was amazingly good. They said that he used to literally put a javelin, put a spear through a ring at 100 paces. So he had obviously very strong, and to be able to throw the spear like that. He said, then when the armies met in the battle, I went forth looking for Hamza to lie in wait for him and to kill him. He said, I found him right in the midst of the fighting, like an enormous camel, striking out viciously at our men with his sword. Nothing could withstand him. She said, I made use of bushes and rocks to get close to him, but Siba bin Abdul Uzza, one of the mushrikeen, one of the Quraysh, he said he got to him before me. Hamza called out to him and he said, come over here, you son of a woman who does circumcisions. So he cursed him and said, come here. And he said he then struck a blow so fast that it seemed to miss his head. But his head flew off, and so I knew that he had not missed. At that time, Hamza radhiyallahu anhu, he relaxed. Now in this particular narration, Wahshi also mentioned, Hamza radhiyallahu anhu was one of the people, and Ali radhiyallahu anhu was another one, Ali bin Abi Talib, who was ambidextrous, and he used to fight, instead of fighting with a sword and a shield, he didn't use a shield, he used to fight with two swords. So it was, there were some people like this. In the Japanese, in the samurai culture, they did that with the katana. The katana, there was a long one and a short one, and the samurai used to fight, many of them would fight with two. They never used shields. They considered that to be sort of unmanly, to protect yourself. So the sword itself was a protection. You're talking about enormous skill. You're talking about practice, unbelievable practice, and enormous strength, because that's what it did. It built muscles like nobody's business. So Hamza radiallahu anhu was in the middle of that, and he then relaxed for a second, and Wahshi said, I aimed my spear carefully, and then I threw my spear, which hit him in the belly and went through his body. He said he saw me, he tried to move towards me, but he was overcome. And the wound was too massive, the spear was still in his body, and he fell. Vashi says, I left him there with the spear until he died. I didn't want to go close to him. He said, I was so frightened, so afraid of him. Even when the man was dying, I could not go close to him. And then when I was sure he was dead, I went there, I pulled my spear out, I retrieved my spear, and I went back to the camp. And I have no business with anyone there except Hamza radiallahu anhu, who I killed only to gain my freedom. Now Rasulullah heard of the death of his uncle, and he was devastated, because this uncle was not just an uncle. Hamza radiallahu anhu was one of his greatest supporters. He was his uncle, so he was like a father to him, but they were also the same age. So in relationship, he was like a father, but they were the same age, so he was a brother to him. They nursed from the same lady, Halima Sadiya radiallahu anha, and so therefore, there was that relationship also. They were very, very, very close. And when he heard of the death of his uncle, Rasulullah wept and wept and wept, and he couldn't stop weeping. It was one of the saddest moments and times in the life of Rasulullah, and that continued throughout his life. Every time Hamza radiallahu anhu was mentioned, he would have tears in his eyes. So, and then when he went and saw his body, he found that it had been mutilated. Now, Al-Wahshi did not do that. Wahshi said, I took my spear and I left. But it was Hind bin Utbah, the wife of Abu Sufyan, who had sworn to eat his liver. These are people, some of these people, subhanAllah, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them iman. I mean, Hind bin Utbah is radiallahu anha. She is one of the sahabiyat of Rasulullah. She became a Muslim, and she was a good Muslim. She died, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the era of Sayyidina Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu, or Sayyidina Umar, later part of his life, because even at the time of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, Abu Sufyan had divorced her, and she was a businesswoman, and she actually went to the Amir Mu'mineen, to the Khalifa, who was Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, and said, give me a loan from the Baitul Mal, which I will return to you, because I want some money to do business. So anyway, when Nabi SAW went there, he found that his uncle body had been mutilated, his stomach was opened, his intestines had been pulled out. The man who took him there, he said, I didn't find him like this. I would not have brought him if I had known this. Somebody has mutilated him. And this is when Hind bin Utbah, at that time she was not a Muslim, she did this. Imagine the sabr of Rasulullah. Despite this, when he had this Hind and her husband Abu Sufyan in his power, Fatah Makkah, he did not order them to be killed. Right? There was enough and more ground for that. He did not order their execution. Both of them became Muslim and became great Muslims. Now Washi then said, I went back to Makkah and I stayed there until Rasulullah conquered Makkah, until he opened Makkah, Fatah Makkah. Then he said, now I didn't know what to do, because now the Muslims are in Makkah and Washi was not Muslim, and Washi was put onto a list of people. Rasulullah in Makkah, after Fatah Makkah, he announced a list of 7 people who, he said, even if you find them clinging to the kiswa of the Kaaba, to the covering of the Kaaba, he said, execute them, kill them, because these are very, very evil people, and one of them was Washi. So Washi knew that he would be killed if any Muslim saw him. So he was hiding. And when Makkah was opened, Muslims came there. He said, then I fled to Taif. He said, then I stayed there until the delegation left to go and meet Rasulullah to accept Islam. And now he said, now I didn't know where to go. Taif also got conquered, so he said, now I did not know where to go. He said, some people asked me, so I said, I'm going to Syria or Yemen or some other country. He said, then someone said to me, he does not kill, yet Rasulullah does not execute, does not kill anyone who accepts his religion. Right? So he will forgive you. So go and meet him. So when she said, I had nowhere to go, I didn't know what to do. So he said, I covered myself up with a turban and then put the turban across his face like this, so nobody would know. And he said, I went to Medina and I surprised him. And I sat down before him and I extended my hand and I said, I have come here and I bear witness, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu annaka Rasulullah. I bear witness that there is no one worthy of worship except Allah and that you are His messenger. Rasulullah accepted him and accepted Islam. And then he said, are you Wahshi? He said, yes, Ya Rasulullah. He said, sit down. He said, tell me how you killed my uncle. So Al-Wahshi radhiyallahu anhu says, I related the story as I related it to you just now. He's saying to the two tabi'un who were with him. And when I finished, he said, Ya Wahshi, go from here, and if you ever come into my majlis, into my gathering, he said, sit at the back where I cannot see you, because every time I see your face, it reminds me of my uncle and it reopens the wound. See, even there, not only did he not curse the man or execute him and so on, he forgave him, but he even did not prohibit him from coming into his majlis. He said, just sit where I cannot see you. You can see me, but I cannot see you. Now, looking at the Nabi is ibadah. Looking at the Nabi is barakah, alayhi salam. But if the Nabi does not see you, it's okay. And in this case, he was obeying the instruction of the Nabi alayhi salam. So he said, Al-Wahshi said, I used to go to him, but I would sit somewhere where he could not see me. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took Rasulullah to himself. Wahshi then joined the army and then he went to fight Musaylima al-Kazzab, the man who declared prophethood after Rasulullah. And he said, I took my spear with which I killed Hamza radhiyallahu anhu, and I saw Musaylima standing with his sword. He said, I aimed my spear at him, and when I was sure, I threw it. At the same time, another Muslim attacked him from the other side with a sword. He said, my spear struck him first, and then the other Muslim struck him. That man was Abu Dujana, using the same sword that Nabi ﷺ had given him. And Wahshi said that if it was I who killed him, then I killed the best of men and I killed the worst of men. Right? So when Wahshi met Rasulullah Rasulullah said to him, now go and fight in the path of Allah as you fought against Allah. So this is the story of Wahshi radhiyallahu anhu and all the things that are relating to Uhud. One other final lesson before we end today is that the expiation of sins, if you, first of all, we must avoid sins. It's not for a Muslim to deliberately commit sins. But whatever happens because of forgetfulness and so on, expiation of that is to do a lot of good deeds. So first of all, make istighfar and tawbah, and then give sadaqah and pray nawafil and be good to people and birrul walidain and so on and so forth. So this is a lesson for us, that how do I expiate my sins? By doing good deeds. Rasulullah said to him, as you fought against Allah, now you go and fight for Allah. So it expiates the sin of having fought against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save us from sin. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to do that which pleases Him and to keep us from what angers Him and does not please Him. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyil kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in bi rahmatika ya rabbal alamin.